Oh, somebody's psyched. They just got a big round of applause.
Woo! Let's give it up for Marianne Williamson! Raise the roof, San Francisco Bay Area! Woo! So, Marianne does not need much introduction in this house. We have some serious fans here. Let's fill her up with all the blessing and mojo we can so when she's out there in less favorable climates, she can light up room after room across this country. So thank you for being our emissary and our inspiration and our prophetess and our future president. Okay. So they asked me to say a couple minutes of intro. I don't need to convince you. You're already here. You recognize the power of this woman to shift lives on an individual level and a collective level. And we have never, ever been at a moment when we need to collectively shift at the level that we do now. And there is no voice on our national stage who can do that better than Marianne can do that. The mainstream may mock her, but people feel the truth force coming through. That is why we need to be her champions and get her message out, to mobilize money and people and just get the message through, because the more people who are touched by her message, the more this country awakens to its higher destiny path, the more we solve the Trump fiasco, the more we reconnect with our highest mission as a country. And when we do that, magic will happen and miracles would happen. And she is our miracle carrier. Let's give it up for Marianne.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I do not feel mocked. I do not feel mocked by you, but I do not also. I'm here this afternoon for the convention of the Democratic National Committee, and you know, everything's fine. Everything's good. And I think, you know, the way I look at my candidacy, it took me 1.5 years to process it. So I can be patient with some other people who have to process it as well. I'm so grateful to those of you who have a deep understanding, which obviously you do, of why I'm running for president. And I feel that the politics that dominates our society today is too narrow a container for the conversations that we need to be having. When the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor In his speech to Congress, President Roosevelt said that our generation, he said, has a rendezvous with destiny. Our generation did not expect to have a rendezvous with destiny. We have appreciated the fact that other generations did, but we thought that we could pretty much coast on what others had done. We didn't think everything was perfect, but we figured somebody was watching the store. A lot of us thought of ourselves as just not political, or we thought of ourselves as changing the world in another way. We didn't feel that the change came from politics. And I think the last 2 years has been a gigantic awakening. You know, and the French have a saying, if you don't do politics, politics will do you. And I think that we have all seen that. All that politics is our collective behavior. That's all that politics is. And if we're responsible for our individual behavior, then I think we're responsible for our collective behavior. And the law of cause and effect, so what an individual does on some level comes back at you, and what a nation does comes back at you as well. And I think that in order to transform a nation, we apply to our own circumstances, transform our own individual lives, have to be called into play. All that a nation is a group of people, so the same psychological and emotional issues that transform one life transform a country. Politics should be the conduit and the channel for our transformation when transformation is needed. But at this point in our history, politics as we know it, conventional politics, is not only a conduit for our transformation, it is an obstruction to our transformation. That is why I'm running for president. I don't have a problem with the American people. I think the American people are just fine. The American people are who we are in issue after issue, poll after poll. We're kind of left of center. The problem is not the consciousness of the American people. The problem is the dangerous and critical gap that exists between the consciousness or the will of the American people and the way our political system operates. And that is, as we know, so that at this point, the very core value of American democracy, which is that our government would be a channel for the expression of a collective will through representative democracy, that is not working. That is blocked because, as we all know, our government now has been hijacked. It has been hijacked by an amoral economic system by which short-term profit maximization for huge corporate entities has more influence on the workings of our government than do we, the people of the United States. And in both domestic as well as international policy, the government, therefore, because of the undue influence of money on Washington, our government does more to advocate for the short-term profit maximization of those corporations than it does to advocate for us and to advocate for our children, our safety, our well-being, safety and well-being of the people of the world, and the safety and well-being of the planet on which we live. This is true to such an extent as to have eroded the basic core of our democracy, turning our democracy into more of a functioning corporatocracy or oligarchy than an actual functioning democracy. And it has brought us to a point where literally dangerous, whether it has to do with dangerous carcinogens in the water, dangerous carcinogens in the air, dangerous carcinogens in the food, literally whether it has to do with things happening to the planet that is actually brought because of climate crisis, brought us to the point where it is a legitimate question whether or not our children or our grandchildren's grandchildren would be able to inhabit this planet. It has gotten to the point, very similar to what happens when you have a friend who drinks or who does drugs to such an extent that you and other people that you know look at each other and say, do you think we should do something? And we all know what that means. It means, should we stage an intervention? It means, should we say to that person, you need to sit down and you need to listen to us. We're not going to sit here and watch this. Because if you continue like this, you could die, and that will not happen on our watch. That is where we need to be about our democracy. And it serves us to realize that it has always been this way in American history. Slavery did not end because the conventional political establishment woke up one day and said, let's end slavery. That's not what happened. The abolitionist movement arose from the early evangelicals and the Quakers. In other words, the people rose up and the people stepped in. The same is true with women's suffrage. The US government did not wake up one day and say, let's give women the right to vote, shall we? That's not what happened. With the women's suffragette movement, the people rose up and the people stepped in. Same with institutionalized white supremacy and segregation in the American South. The US government did not wake up one day and say, let us end segregation, shall we? No, that's not what happened. With Dr. Martin Luther King, a Baptist preacher, and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference and the Civil Rights Movement, the people rose up and the people stepped in. History would therefore inform us that it is foolish and naive to think that the current political establishment is going to fix itself. It is ridiculous, and I challenge the idea that only those whose careers have been entrenched for decades in the limitations of the very political mindset that has driven us into this ditch are the only people we should consider qualified to lead us out of this ditch. That is ridiculous. No. That's not the way it's going to happen. Very, very good, very well-intentioned people work and live within that system. But let me tell you something, ladies and gentlemen. The kind of fundamental pattern disruption of the economic and political and social status quo that we need now is not going to happen because one of them are willing to do it. It's going to happen because the people rise up and the people step in. This is the way it is. We have been trained to expect so little, and we have in many, many ways conspired with our own disempowerment. We now have a situation where the people of the United States and the founders left the power of this country into the hands of the people, but it's not in your hands, it's not in your mind anymore. And we have allowed ourselves to forget. We have allowed ourselves to be trained to think of ourselves as merely spectators in a horse race. Spectators in a horse race. It's like we need to go to AA or something like that. Like we think, well, can the Republicans handle it or can the Democrats handle it? Who can manage this situation? Well, you and I need to realize neither one of them, the situation has become unmanageable. Within that system, the only place, the founder said, that power is safe, the only repository for democracy is in us. And what has happened is that the main pillars of our democracy, our mission statement, the Declaration of Independence, that's our mission statement. In our mission statement,